everyone. Welcome to our community education video. Today we're talking about 5 things when someone is actively dying, and I'm joined by Dr. Eric Bush, who's the Chief Medical Officer for Hospice of the Chesapeake and Chesapeake Supportive Care. So, tender topic, actively dying. I feel like we should have first start with that term because a lot of people, dying is dying. So what does actively dying mean?
Yeah, no, I appreciate what you're saying. I think especially in the context of the COVID pandemic and now, unfortunately, the U.S. having eclipsed 400,000 lives lost, more than in World War II, I think it's on everybody's minds. Actively dying is really that final phase of life here, when God's calling you home. So typically, usually those last 3 days.
Okay.
And what you see is you tend to see drop in blood pressure. The patient, your loved one, tends to be less responsive, if responsive at all.
Okay.
Sometimes they can have a little bit, you'll hear about the rattle that they may have. And what that is the body just relaxing, or you can think about it as disengaging, is the way I think about it.
Okay.
The muscles in the back of the throat are relaxing, so people are no longer able to clear those secretions. There's often changes in breathing pattern. So, and especially as people get closer, they can actually have pauses in their breathing and then may try to recover and have several, rapid breaths, that Cheyne-Stokes breathing that people talk about.
Right.
And color changes. So color changes in their fingers and toes, typically the areas that are furthest from the heart. Again, as the heart relaxes, as the body relaxes, and there's less blood flow to those areas furthest from it, you can see almost a purplish lacy discoloration that we call mottling, M-O-T-T-L-I-N-G. And it doesn't hurt. It's not causing your loved one distress. It's just another indicator that things are changing for them, and God's calling them home at that time.
Gotcha. So you went over several of the physical signs, which was one of my second question. When you say sort of that active stage takes, roughly is the 3-day, is there any like specific time period when someone is dying at the end?
No, so usually before that quote unquote actively dying time frame, there's a period of time where we call transitioning. And that's usually at least several days before the actively dying phase. And at that time, somebody is less responsive, but maybe they'll give you 1 or 2 word answers to questions if you give them, well-focused questions or queries, or maybe they'll nod their head yes or no. But again, it's all in line with that whole disengagement process.
Right.
And that 3 days, I tell people, God keeps me honest with what I do. Sometimes it's 3 days, sometimes it's 7 days. Our approach, our focus for that time of life is making sure people are comfortable.
Right.
And once we've been able to achieve that comfort level, we just take it a day at a time, because there's so many things that are still unknown that we don't understand in this world, that as long as somebody appears to be symptomatically managed, whatever that time frame is, it is, because it varies from person to person, that I can tell you.
Yeah. So, all right, we covered sort of the definition, the timing, some of the physical symptoms. I want to add a sub question about eating, because I'm sure this can cause stress for families when their loved one sort of during this end of life process isn't engaged in food. There's so much in our culture and in our food is love, right? So that's one thing that seems to kind of cause stress for folks. Can you talk a little bit about that process and what happens with it?
Sure, you're right. So food is so highly ingrained in our culture, and as well as illness. If you think about the first time you were sick, what was the first thing your mother said to you? Is that you got to eat to get better. And but this time, when somebody's at a time of life, it's different, and people take in what they need, and they're not taking in anything that's what they need at that time. It's unsafe for them to eat. If you think about back to what we're talking about with the swallowing and how those muscles relax, there's no way for them to be able to get food down safely. The other piece too is it does not limit someone's life expectancy. People in general can go up to 30 days without food, without fluids. 7 days is textbook, but usually 7 to 10, somewhere in that time frame. And so as you're disengaging and as you're going naturally, just think about what your body is utilizing from a caloric perspective, really very minimal. And so you're able to get on day after day without eating. It's not causing anybody pain. It's not causing them harm. It's not causing discomfort. It's just naturally what they need at that time.
I really think it's helpful, that phrase that you use, the disengaging, because
Yeah.
that really kind of explains it in a really helpful way.
Right. Well, one thing I did want to mention is that in that whole disengagement process, I actually had the question this morning on rounds from a patient's son, is there are two things that patients can still sense. That is touch, and it's almost reflexive in nature, and they will respond to their loved one's touch more so than they would to mine. In addition, voice. So we know that patients, that hearing is one of the last senses to go, that patients can hear up until the very end. We're not sure, obviously, how much they can process, but again, if they're going to respond at all, they tend to respond better to their loved one's voice than they would the doc or the nurse that's in the room seeing them.
That's not familiar to them. Yeah, that makes
Correct.
sense. So that would be my fourth question then, is
Mhm.
is if your hearing is the last thing to go, as a loved one, are there things that, in your experience, that seem helpful or comforting to say or not to say? Sort of any guidance in that?
Yeah, so treat your loved one as you were treating them their whole lives. People's character or logic, people's personality does not change at that time of life. If anything, those things are only enhanced. So think, reminisce with them, tell them things you think they'd want to hear, things that would be comforting or soothing. We know that those are things that the patients will find soothing, and it's often, therapeutic for the loved ones too as well. We realize what a frightening time of life this can be when you're losing a loved one. And so I think this is an important topic. I appreciate you bringing it up, especially, again, context of what's transpired with COVID. It's
Right.
become a lot more pertinent. I think just like everything else, the more education you have, the more you know what to expect and what you can do to help address those issues, the better off you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my fifth question that I've heard a lot anyway, is about pain management, and specifically morphine in the dying process, and the concern that could speed up or cause harm when somebody's at the end of their life. Can you just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, in general, it doesn't. Obviously, each situation can be individual, but our approach here is we start with pediatric doses of, morphine, and it is not something that hastens death. It only provides comfort, whether it's for pain or shortness of breath. That's another thing. A lot of times people don't realize, for a lot of patients with pulmonary issues, again, whether it's emphysema or pulmonary fibrosis or other progressive issues, it really helps relieve the sense of breathlessness for
Right.
the patient. So, and these things do not hasten death. Sometimes you'll pick up the news and you hear about these situations where opioids did cause somebody's demise. Those are way higher doses than are used, at this time of life.
Got it. Got it. So this is just another helpful tool for making it as
Exactly. Exactly.
possible. All right. Thank you, Dr. Bush. I know
Sure. Thanks, Tammy.
I agree with you. This is it's hard think about and to talk about, but it is, when you're in that situation, it's helpful to understand sort of what to expect. So
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you.
I also want to thank the John and Kathy Belcher Institute for their generous support of the community education programs at Hospice of the Chesapeake.